So hello and welcome back to Virtual World's Best Practice in Education Conference. We're here during I guess sort of the final 10, 12 hours of the conference. And with us today we have John Pathfinder Lester as someone who really doesn't need a whole lot of introduction, but you know something, we're going to do one anyways. So, John's here to speak about exploring the educational affordances of web-based virtual worlds, and specifically with regards to Jibe and Unity 3D, which I know I'm looking forward to hearing more about this. John is an expert and strategist in the use of virtual worlds and social media to support educational online communities. He's currently the Director of Community Development at Reaction Grid, a 3D world development company focused on the educational and business use of virtual worlds for collaborative work and team training. John has worked on the development of online communities and virtual worlds since 1995, when he first pioneered the use of online communities and virtual worlds for medical education and patient support at the Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. From 2005 and 2010, as most people know here, he worked at Linden Lab, where he was known as Pathfinder Linden. During his tenure at Linden Lab, he led the development of the education and healthcare markets while evangelizing. My apologies, I always stumble over that word.
I wrote that as a tongue twister for you.
Did you?
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I am. You know something? This is great. Everybody throws that word in, and especially when I have to do the introductions.
Well, you're doing great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Excellent. So the use of virtual worlds in academia, training, and immersive situations. John, thank you very much for being here with us, and the stage is yours.
Well, thank you. It's really great to be here, and wow, what a stage this is, huh? I mean, this is, talk about a really beautiful immersive area. I've been wandering around this area when no one's been around, so I could sort of explore it, and there's just all kinds of really amazing little nooks and crannies here. I really like the steampunk theme. I think it was a really brilliant idea too to think of a consistent theme like that for visually immersing people in this environment. So first of all, I'm going to paste a URL in chat here, in local chat. And I only have 3 slides, because I'm going to mostly talk, and then we can actually show you guys what I'm talking about in terms of an actual web-based virtual world. But what I wanted to talk about today was the educational affordances of web-based virtual worlds. Talking specifically about some of the stuff that I've been working on, but also thinking about it in a broader picture. So I'm not just going to be talking only about technology. And if you folks open my slides and you look at my first slide is just sort of the standard intro, and my contact info is on there as well. And on the second slide, you will see that I have really just 5 things I wanted to talk about. What's my story? What is Reaction Grid? What do educators need? That's really, I think, what I'm going to talk about most. And then what is Unity 3D and what is Jibe? I wanted to start out with just what's my story, not because I like to talk about myself, but for 2 reasons. One is that I think one of the neat things about this place is that I've met a lot of people who are really new to this whole virtual world space. During the conference, I've been wandering around, and I've met a lot of people who are like, whoa, this is the first time I've really come into this environment. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. The educators here in Second Life are a very tight-knit community and a wonderfully collaborative one, too. But you have to remember, too, that it's one that is growing and needs to constantly remember the fact that there are people coming into this who are totally new at it, right? You have new teachers, new students, who are just starting to discover the affordances of virtual worlds. And so I wanted to start out with just a little bit about my story, so people really just understand my perspective and understand the perspective that I'm trying to bring to all of this and what I've seen, and maybe folks can maybe learn from some of the mistakes that I've made and build on that. So I really come to all of this. I come to education in virtual worlds from a background in neurology and neuroscience research. I started out my career as a researcher doing research in neurodegenerative diseases. And I used a lot of computing technology to do some of the visualization work that I was focusing on, visualizing and modeling 3D pathways in the human brain. But over time I got very interested in and really much more excited about how computing technology could be used in general to connect people with other people, to help people share knowledge, to help people share ideas, and to help people collaborate with each other. And I also got very interested in communities. I started actually working with the communities of patients who were dealing with the neurological conditions that I was studying. So patients and caregivers dealing with Alzheimer's disease, Huntington's disease, Parkinson's disease. And what I found over time was something pretty fascinating. It was that people who had a common goal and who had common needs, they were finding technology, and then they were taking that technology and they were using it directly applied to their goals and their needs. And that sounds kind of obvious, but a lot of times we hear about technologies that are, here's a technology and okay, how do we use it, right? This is kind of the opposite. This is a group of people who were like, we need to do this, 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 and this, and what technology can we find to help us do this? And in this case, with the patients and caregivers that I was working with, they were finding, for example, in the early days of the web, they were finding things like web-based bulletin boards, and they were realizing, well, these are great resources for us to communicate and share knowledge. And oh, here are some chat rooms, and oh, here's IRC, Internet Relay Chat, and I was just very fascinated by this process of discovery of tools that were then applied directly to their goals. And so actually that's what started me down the path of working with virtual worlds, because I was interested in tools that added more emotional bandwidth to the interactions between people, ways of conveying more emotional information in a more immersive way. And that's really what started me down the path of virtual worlds for education, because I was using virtual environments for patients and caregivers, and then eventually medical students, to help immerse themselves in a learning curriculum, and also to help them connect with each other more deeply. So that's really my story. I really don't come to all of this with from a technical background in computer science of any sort. I come to this from a people perspective, from the perspective of here are a group of people with goals. How can we help them succeed at achieving those goals? And how can we help them better connect with technologies that can do that? So that's my story. So now you understand my perspective. And I think a lesson that might be useful to you is to really remember that that's how real broad change happens. A group of people come together with goals and share their goals, and then find the right tools applied to those goals. It's the people first, not technology first. So I worked at Linden Lab. I switched careers. I decided to work at. I decided to try to work at a company that was building some of these tools, and I was fascinated with Second Life, and I'm still fascinated with it. I think it's a fantastic platform. So I switched. I jumped out of academic healthcare and research, and when I came to Linden Lab in 2005, And while I was there, I focused on the education community. I remember, folks at Linden Lab, when I started, they said, we're seeing some activity starting with teachers using this. What's going on with that? And I said, I think this is going to be really big, so I'm going to focus on that. That's what I want to do. I want to help this community grow. And so I just did some very basic things in terms of scaffolding and policies and so forth to help support that growth. And also I did a lot of working with people to connect them with other people. Because again, right, it's the people first. I spent a lot of time helping people find people who I felt were good collaborators. And I think that's something that all of you folks are already doing and should continue to do and do as much as possible of. And that is, oh, I hear you're doing this. You should work with this person. I heard this other person's working on something similar. Because as educators, as teachers, as academics, you all depend upon collaboration to move everybody forward. So I think that that's something that is an important skill to continue to promote among your colleagues and your friends and people that you're working with in your schools and in your research and all of that. So I was at Linden Lab for 5 years, and then I got laid off, like a lot of other really good folks got laid off too, as the company changed its focus. And I spent a few months really just trying to think about what I wanted to do next. I wanted to really think about what I was interested in pursuing moving forward after I got let go from Linden Lab. And I looked around and I realized I didn't touch a computer for a while. I just said, I'm going to step away from the computer. I'll just, I think it was a couple months I didn't do anything with a computer. And I realized that I was very, very interested in communities and still in virtual worlds. It was always in the back of my mind. And I started looking around to see sort of what the landscape was from a broader perspective. Because when I was at Linden Lab, I was naturally, focused solely on Second Life most of the time. I was very busy working on developing that platform and building it out. And so I stepped back and I looked at the broader picture, and what I saw was an interesting pattern of growth where I saw educators looking much more thoughtfully than I'd ever really expected at the broad spectrum of tools in terms of different virtual world platforms. And really, it was, I had a bit of tunnel vision with being focused on Second Life so much, and understandably so, I think, just because, that was working at Linden Lab. And what I was very impressed with what I saw in terms of educators exploring the bigger picture was how they took a very multi-tool approach to all of it. So it wasn't so much that they were using one platform or the other or another. It was that they were using one platform and another in terms of different virtual worlds. So I looked around and decided I want to somehow get involved in this again, from a broader picture and hopefully from a multi-tool perspective as well. So I found a company called, this is point number 2. We're on number 2 out of 5. I found a company called Reaction Grid. And Reaction Grid is a company that is a virtual world platform developer. And what I mean by that is it's a company that is looking at how to develop platforms to provide to educators and anyone involved in learning. So it also includes businesses doing things like professional development and training, and government, doing training and distance learning. But how to provide virtual world platforms to people. And I noticed that Reaction Grid was working with OpenSim as a core platform, as well as a product called Jibe, which which is based on Unity 3D, which I'll explain what that is later. But two totally different platforms. And when I talked with them, they were also talking about other things they were thinking of doing. And I realized that was that was what I felt was the perspective that I wanted to move forward with. And that was looking at how to develop different tools in terms of virtual world platforms, different tools for educators to explore using. And that really comes to the point 3, which is, I think, what do educators need? I don't pretend to know all of the intricacies of what educators need, but I think I can make some pretty good guesses based on my observations over the years, and I'm always listening. So I like to hear about what people need. And I like to hear, I like to try to identify patterns in those needs over broad groups of people. And I think what I see educators needing are, just in general, just a spectrum of tools to explore using to really best explore the affordances of virtual worlds in general, right? There is no one tool that does it all with virtual worlds. The same way there is no one, there's not one program on your computer that does it all. There are many different programs. The same goes for so many different applications on the web. If you think about how you use email versus other communication modalities like Twitter, or if you use Facebook, or if you use Plurk, and then how you use sharing image, how do you share visual things? How do you use YouTube? How do you use Flickr? It's always about a spectrum of tools. And so I think in terms of virtual worlds, I think it's the same thing. I think it's all about having a spectrum of choices for virtual worlds. I think in terms of virtual worlds, what educators need are choices. I think they need a palette of colors for painting their worlds, and because that's, I think, the best way to succeed. And of course, what that speaks to as well is that ideally all of these different tools and platforms will somehow interoperate, right? The beauty of a palette of colors is that you can paint. You can dip your brush in the blue paint, and then dip your brush in the red paint, and you can put them right next to each other on the canvas, right? You can have them coexist. And I think with virtual worlds, I think that is, in terms of needs, I think that is something that educators need and would really help them. The idea of having virtual environments that are linked to each other, different platforms, communicating with different platforms, virtual world platforms communicating with completely different platforms. This interoperability, this ability to have a spectrum of choices and have these different choices not be siloed but be interoperating with each other, right? I really think the future is about being interconnected, and I mean that in the broadest sense of the word. If you look at how the web itself evolved, really that's how it all took off. It was because of its interconnected nature. Things can scale infinitely when they're distributed and interconnected. That's how ecosystems grow. That's how the web has grown. So I just wanted to plant that little seed in your head, that idea that I've had is that, what fundamentally I think educators need most are choices and many different tools in terms of virtual world platforms, and they ideally need them to interoperate and work together. So I think anybody working on virtual world platforms has to really think about that. It's about creating environments that are permeable. It's about creating platforms that are interconnected. It's about creating things that integrate with other things at the most fundamental level. And so that's my feeling about that. And in terms of web-based virtual worlds, right? It's not about the thing that gets me excited about virtual worlds that operate in web browsers, and there are others out there, there are different types out there already, and you could sort of argue semantics about, well, what is a virtual world? Is Farmville a virtual world? Kind of. It's a virtual world full of turnips and potatoes, but it's in a browser. But the thing I think it's important for all of you as educators to remember when you're thinking about web-based virtual worlds is that, in my opinion, it's not about the world being accessible from the web. That's cool, but that's not the really important thing. I think the really important thing is that the worlds that are embedded in the web can then be interconnected with the rest of the web in really exciting ways. If you have a web-based virtual world on the back end, because it's already on the web, it can be integrated with all of this other web-based content that you have. It can be integrated with learning management systems and content management systems. It can be integrated into your portal, and all of this interesting stuff can be happening on the back end so that it becomes part of a seamless experience of interconnectedness, right, on the web, which is what the web is all about. The web is all about a seamless experience of interconnectiveness. And once you get virtual worlds on the web, that's where it happens, right? That's where you start getting this type of interconnectiveness with the virtual world as well as all of the other tools. I'm going to take a sip of water here just a second. Excuse me. So I think that's in terms of the affordances, unique affordances of web-based virtual worlds in general, is that fact. It's not about the convenience of having it in a web browser. I really don't think it's about, the fact that you don't have to download a standalone application. I mean, usually you have to download a little plugin anyway. What's really important about it is the fact that it allows virtual worlds to become part of this larger canvas of interconnectivity on the web. And I think that's something important to think about, as all of you as educators are thinking about the spectrum of tools that you're using. So, and again, it's not one or the other, right? It's not about one over another. The same way it's not, red wine versus white, each in its right context. It's too early for me to be talking about wine as metaphors. I don't know why I pulled that one out of my hat. That was funny. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about next is, what is Unity 3D? Because I said something about Jibe and Unity 3D. And if you look at the slides that the link that I pasted out there, and I'll put it out there again in case anybody came in late. On on the first slide, you'll see 3 logos. The reaction grid, that's the company logo. Then you'll see the Unity logo. Then you see Jibe logo, and you may be like, well, what's Unity? What's Jibe? I don't understand. Well, I wanted to talk about Unity 3D a little bit to help you understand how that fits into web-based virtual worlds, but how it fits into a lot more. Okay, Unity 3D is a commercial game development platform. It is if you go to, I have the link on the third page, unity3d.com. It is a platform for creating 3D games. You can actually also use it to create 2D games. But it's fundamentally a 3D game development platform that is designed to allow you to deploy, which means release and put out into the world, 3D games on as wide a range of platforms as possible. And by that I mean you have an editor where you're creating these Unity 3D games, and you click a button and say, okay, save this as a standalone program that runs on a Mac or a PC, or, oh no, click this and save it as a file that could be loaded on a web page. Oh no, click it and save it as a file that could be loaded on an iPhone, on an iPad, on an Android device, on a game console, right? So have it play on a Xbox, PlayStation 3, Wii. And what the folks at Unity 3D have done is come up with not just a series of tools, but also a philosophy, really, the way I see it. They've come up with a philosophy of empowering people to create compelling 3D games across as wide a range of platforms, to make it as easy as possible, yet make it on the level of professional tools, meaning really polished, really organized, really, really professional in the most positive sense of the word. And they've also made it incredibly accessible. They haven't made it insanely expensive to develop using their platform, and they have a free version of their editor. They have a professional one that costs money if you want a lot of high-end features. But they have a free version of their editor that is really easy to use and is very powerful. And so what you see is springing up a community around Unity 3D development of game developers and also just interested people who are fascinated with 3D environments, people who are fascinated with interactivity in these environments. And it's a really neat community. If you start digging into what's going on with Unity 3D in terms of the community of people developing for it, it's a very interesting, sharing and fun community of people. And so that's what Unity 3D is. Now, what Reaction Grid did was they said, okay, this Unity 3D platform has really amazing affordances and a really amazing philosophy. And a really interesting way of empowering people, right, to develop 3D games and allow those games to circulate on a variety of platforms. So you have, again, a wide range of tools, right, like I was saying earlier, a wide range of different tools for different people. And what the folks at Reaction Grid did said, okay, well, what if we could use this platform, which is designed to create these sort of single-user games, what if we use that as a way to develop a virtual world platform that has avatars and multiple people and the ability for people to log in, right? What if we use that to develop a virtual world platform? And so that's what Jibe is. Okay. So Jibe, what is Jibe? Jibe is the virtual world platform that is built using Unity 3D. And so what Jibe allows you to do is have an environment with multiple users logging in as avatars. You can have a registration database, you can do all that stuff, or you can have it just be an open world where it's very easy to get in and just click and type in any name you want. You don't have to register or anything like that. Again, having options, right? The key is having options. The version 1.0 that it's out now allows people to access a web page, basically. And toward the end of the talk here, I'll paste the the third slide, the third URL is is a link to my own Jibe world that I set up. Now it doesn't support Linux at the moment yet, and that's a Unity 3D issue, right? It's because the Unity 3D plugin doesn't currently support Linux. Now I'm noticing there are like 100 avatars here. I'm not sure how many people my Jibe room will support. So I'm a little bit hesitant at this moment because I think it depends on licensing. I think I only have like a 50 user license. No, that's okay if somebody tweeted about jumping into my room. But I'll pull it up in a web browser in a minute. I could actually do it concurrently. But if you open that up in your web browser, the third link, what you'll see is, you'll just type in any name, choose any avatar, and you'll go into it's an office space that I set up. Very, very basic setup in Jibe. And again, I'm not coming at this from a 3D graphics professional or professional programmer perspective, right? I just kind of sort of can stumble around in terms of building things in 3D, and as far as programming, I know how to copy and paste and sort of look at things and say, okay, I think I know what that does. I can't write things from scratch very well. But what I've created, I think, is a good indication of kind of what you can do just starting off, right? If you go into the environment, I have it disabled at the moment, but voice actually works in there too. There's a little, I have it turned off now, but you'll normally get a little thing that says install the Vivox plugin, and then it clicks download. You download either the Mac or the PC version, and then you can actually speak in it. I'll paste the URL. I'll do that now. Let's see here. And you know what I'll do? I'll actually also open it up in another web browser. It works well with Chrome. I saw somebody mentioned it might not work with Chrome, but I actually use Chrome very well. So here I'll open up. One thing is the world will scale to whatever size your web page is when you first open that URL. If you then try to resize your web page, some of the user interface elements may move around a little bit weirdly because I'm still tweaking that. This is always a work in progress at this point for me. But you can either have the world a specific resolution in a screen on a web page, or you can have it just fill whatever the size the web page is and resize as you resize the web page so you can make it full screen. When you go there for the first time, it will require a plugin, right? Like pretty much everything on the web, it will require a Unity 3D plugin. Oh, I'm in World, and there's like a few people in here already. Look at that. I'm not going to type in World. For folks who are in the Jibe world, I'm not going to type because then I'm going to start having to split my brain between two screens and speaking and typing at the same time. So I want to be able to focus on the conversation here. So let's see, getting back to Jibe. So the idea with Jibe is to create a web-based environment that is that brings the experience of a virtual world into the web browser. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's not about it being easy. It's not about it being in the web browser. It's about it being able to be connected to all of the things that exist in web browsers, right? So you imagine having on the back end the ability to integrate, because it's already on the web, you can do on the back end all of these tools to integrate it with your existing databases, your knowledge management systems, your web-based curriculum, and all of that. Wow, people are really popping in here. This is cool. And also, if you're wondering, you have a choice of avatars that you can choose from in Jibe. The one that is the last one, that's actually modeled after me. Everything in Jibe is mesh-based, right? Because it's based on it's a professional game development environment. So everything is mesh. All the scripting is in JavaScript and C#. It has all kinds of interesting things like if you're into graphics, it has normal maps, right, which is what everybody uses to make 3D things look even more 3D using less polygons. It has camera collisions, which means like in any 3D game, right, as you're walking down the hallway and you turn left and you turn right, the camera is smart enough to know not to float through the wall. It kind of moves, right, a little bit. It has all of those nice affordances. One feature that this world does not have yet is you can't fly. So just letting you know, it's coming. Because everyone asks me that. Everyone who comes into this environment asks me, can I fly? And some people are asking asking, can you fly now? You can jump, and we're working on, you can run too, and I set up a forest around the periphery. So you could try. I like it because I like to try running through it. I didn't make the trees collidable. You can make things physical or non-physical in these environments, and I made everything in the forest non-collidable. But try running through it, and it'll give you a sense of how smooth it can be, right? How the rendering engine is really really nice, and the animations are smooth, and you run by holding down the arrow key and just holding it. You press. You're walking and you just keep holding it, and eventually you'll start running. And the other interesting thing is, in this environment, all of the avatars are just mesh models, right? So they could be anything you want. We made these avatars you see now. With your own Jibe world, you can make whatever mesh model you want. as the avatar. Rig it however you want, so it's animated. And of course, that also means you have affordances for non-player characters, right? For bots, as they're called here in Second Life, which means it's very easy to create scripted non-player characters because everything's a mesh model in here, and there's no emoting yet, right? And and again, this is a 1.0 release, so there are a lot of features in here now, but there are a lot more coming. And Chris Hart, who's our CTO, who I actually saw, she just popped in here. She's really she is the driving force behind all of this. This is her work. Jibe is all her work, with of course contributions from a lot of other folks, but it's her vision, and the plan is, as we move forward with this platform, is to continue to take feedback from people about how we can make things better. And so I'm going to paste a link in local chat here. There's a metaverseheroes.com. And what that is our support suite. And you can submit a ticket. We like to use it for people submitting ideas, right? For tickets don't just mean, oh, something's wrong. We like tickets that are like, hey, what about this? Have you thought about doing that? So if you've got some ideas, if you play around with this platform and you got some ideas on how to make it better, or you'd like to see different kinds of features, or if you just have questions, please go to metaverseheroes.com and submit a ticket, because that's the best way for us to get a sense of how we want to take this moving forward. And the environment that we're in right now, or that a lot of you are in right now on the web, I hold office hours now in this environment, as well as an OpenSim, because we use OpenSim as a platform as well. But I hold office hours twice a week. And if you go to my blog, which is listed on my first website, it's called Be Cunning and Full of Tricks. If you go to my blog, you can find a link to my office hours, and I can meet you in here. And we can talk about Unity 3D and web browser-based virtual worlds. All of the content that you see in this space, if you're exploring it now, is all stuff that I either found or bought or tweaked from the internet. There's a crashed spaceship that has fires that I use it to sort of illustrate localized sounds. You can hear the fires burning, and you can climb the spaceship, and it's crashed in a pool of burning oil. I bought that spaceship, and it's interesting because it's an example of a very low polygon count spaceship. This spaceship was actually used in some mobile game, on a Unity-based mobile game on the iPhone. And I just got the model, and I just crashed it there. The second spaceship that I have is a very high quality mesh build, and you can't get in it by climbing the ladders. You have to learn how to jump. So it's you figure out how to jump up on the wing and climb inside the spaceship. But you'll notice also, if you explore the house that I have set up, you'll see how the camera collisions work, so that your camera is always behind you. And the camera moves intelligently. And the house is sort of a worst-case scenario in terms of how do you navigate the camera around. So I wanted something that was kind of really hard, so it would show you that the camera does a really good job of always being behind you, colliding with physical walls, and always being giving you a perspective in front of you, even if it's a very tight room or something. So anyway, that's what Jibe is, and so I think, obviously I'm very excited about this platform, but I'm here today not to talk just about a particular product, and I'm not trying to do a product pitch here. What I'm trying to do is think about and talk about what I'm seeing in terms of what educators need, and what I think are helpful ways of just looking at the broad perspective of virtual worlds as tools for education. I think there's a lot of really amazing work that's happening in Second Life, and that's also happening in OpenSim. I see some amazing work happening in World of Warcraft, believe it or not. Joe K. Wollongong has been doing some really interesting work with students in World of Warcraft. You should talk to her. She's a really brilliant educator from Australia. And she actually runs her own OpenSim grid. Here, I'll paste this in here as well to chat. jocadiagrid.com. Check out her grid. But she's exploring other virtual worlds for education. She's exploring game worlds for education. How to leverage that. And there are other web-based environments out there. There's a lot of work going on, and a lot of interesting things happening in terms of how virtual worlds can be deployed in different ways. Personally, I think not only is what gets me very excited about not just Jive itself, but though is the fact that it's based on a platform that has a huge thriving community. If you do some digging around Unity 3D, you'll see an amazing community of people. And of course what that means is there's an amazing community of resources, right? There are people who are doing things, who can help you, who can collaborate with you, right? Because of course that's the scariest thing, isn't it? When you start exploring something new, when you're a pioneer, the scariest thing is to be a wagon train of one, right? If you have other people who are going along the same path as you, it makes everything a lot smoother. So in terms of doing Unity 3D development, there is a huge exciting community of folks doing that kind of work. And so I'd encourage you to look into that. Just on its own, just as it exists itself. I think the Unity 3D community is fascinating. And that really brings me to my last point in general, which in terms of affordances, and also just sort of thoughts about the needs of educators. And it has to do with games, okay? It has to do with games and the gaming development community in particular, which is what Unity 3D is, as an example of a gaming development community, a community of people making games. I've heard conversations here, and I was part of a panel yesterday, where we had a really good discussion about intersections. And I love intersections. I love where things bump up against each other. The most interesting and innovative things always happen at the edges of things bumping into each other and where they start to overlap. And we were talking about games and education. Right. Now, there's always been, there's a long history of educational games, and dare I say the word that I always hated the word, but edutainment. You folks remember that word? Edutainment. That was used for a while. I don't know. I haven't heard anyone use it for years. Edutainment. Yeah. Oh my God. And so there was a lot of talk about how can we make games for education, and this really kind of peaked a few years ago. Remember all that? Yeah. And you know what? The games really sucked. They were just really bad games. You had these examples of edutainment, and eventually it became kind of the kiss of death. If you called anything edutainment, it was just like, oh, don't go near it with a 10-foot pole, right? Now I see somebody in chat saying, now the term is gamification, which is a little bit different. Gamification is about taking like sort of your daily life and somehow adding the ability to level up every time I brush my teeth, right? And rewarding me with what? A badge, level up. You have eaten 5 donuts. You've leveled up. You now weigh 10 pounds heavier or something. I don't know. But the interesting thing, I think, is that I'm hearing many more conversations around among educators using virtual worlds in general. I'm hearing many more conversations about how educators really need to build immersive and entertaining and deeply engaging experiences in virtual worlds in ways that have a lot of free-form activities, but also in ways that have structure, right? In ways that have a scaffolding of definitions of success and measurements and evaluation and all of that. And guess what? That's what games are, right? And educators are starting to realize that. They're starting to realize that, I need to make a quest game. I need a system, a questing type game system to allow people to explore this recreation of an archaeological dig, and they will be rewarded for identifying correctly these different things, and your score is actually an evaluation. Your score is actually a quantification of how well you've learned the content, right? So I'm hearing a lot of really thoughtful conversations around games and how to make good games that are focused on education. And that really excites me because I've been kind of waiting for that to happen. I've often talked about, when I was at Linden Lab, I often talked about how, there are all these role-playing gamers in Second Life and these educators doing things. They need to really get together, because there's something there. I think there's something on the gaming side intersecting with the education side, and in particular the role-playing, the questing type games. You guys need to get together and put on a show together. And I'm starting to see that kind of thing happen more and more now. I'm starting to hear about educational virtual world experiences that are really very sophisticated games. And I'm also starting to hear just the term game itself lose its pejorative overtones. It used to be like, oh, that's just a game, or games are somehow frivolous. I'm seeing over time a gradual and slow but inevitable sort of letting go of any kind of negative connotations around the term game. So that's the other thing that excites me, just in particular, in general, among the Unity 3D community, because those are game developers. And I think the trick for educators in terms of looking at how to develop games for education is to work with people like that. It's not to try to become a game developer yourself from scratch, because guess what? It's very hard. There's a whole different set of competencies and skills and things that take many years to master to be a very good game developer. But I think what you need to do is to collaborate. And of course the good news is that's what educators do really well, right? You collaborate. And you love, from my experience, educators love multidisciplinary collaboration, don't you? I mean, I hear all the time, it's so hard to do this multidisciplinary stuff, but wow, this is fascinating. I love this. It's the hardest thing I've ever loved, So I would encourage all of you, as you're, check out Jibe. I'd love to meet you in my environment, talk about this stuff, and let me know if you have any questions. But just in general, just Unity 3D itself, just look at that initially. And if you're thinking about developing games, look for game developers that you can collaborate with. Look at finding communities, maybe not Unity 3D community, but look very carefully to find communities where these people live and where you can start thinking multidisciplinary. Educators working with game developers, working together to create these immersive experiences that have structure and scaffolding and are able to evaluate, quantify the learning, and engage, right? Make students excited and engaged in the whole learning experience. So I think my time is coming up. This little yellow, I have a yellow button here now, and it says 5. I think that's a countdown. When it gets to 0, I think the steam pipes here are just going to shoot me into the sky. But that's my talk. That's what I wanted to share with you all. And again, on my slides, there is a lot of there are a number of links there, ways to get in touch with me. Here are my slides again. Here's the link, and I hope to hear from you soon. And I hope you have a great rest of the conference. I think it's always been fun. I've been to every one of these best practices in education conferences, and thank you to everyone on the team who's put this all together. You guys have just worked so hard, and this has grown so much. It's just a fantastic thing to be part of. And yeah, each year is amazing. Perplexity in chat is saying each year is amazing. Yeah, I can't agree more. All right. I think I'm like 4 minutes early, but I'm going to stop early. How about that? 4 minutes early. You have 4 minutes of your life back. Let's just do that. Questions? Oh, okay. Oh, I'll do questions, actually. I didn't realize I can do questions here, too. All right, yeah, ask some questions in local chat.
It's a virtual world. You can do whatever you want in here.
I can, yeah.
You can do questions. You can wait till you get blown off the stage.
Let me see. Okay. Where's, if you have questions that you had typed in earlier, can you paste them in again? Because I may have just missed it. And I'm scrolling back, and there's a lot of, I can't find a lot of it. Oh, someone says, what am I doing in OS Grid? I don't actually have a presence in OS Grid. OS Grid is an OpenSim-based grid. I do a lot of work in OpenSim itself. OpenSimulator is the core code that is used to run a bunch of different grids. I have my little home base on Jocadia Grid, and Reaction Grid actually has a lot of customers that run their own grids. Reaction Grid is really about setting people up with their own virtual worlds, be it a Jibe world or be it an OpenSim grid. So one thing I do, and this is a different topic though, I do a Hypergrid Adventurers Club where we explore the hypergrid of OpenSim. We jump from grid to grid. Go to my blog to read more about that. And I actually had a talk yesterday about that as well. But if you go to my blog, which is on the first slide that I had in there, it's Be Cunning and Full of Tricks. Here, I'll type it in here real quick. And it's a reference to Be Cunning and Full of Tricks is from the book Watership Down, but I'll leave it to you to find out the context of that. Let's see here. Oh, wait a minute, one other question. Could Jibe worlds be connected to OpenSim grids? Well, they're two fundamentally different platforms on the back end. So, Jibe is not about a window into OpenSim. Jibe is about a virtual world platform based on a game development platform. That said, though, right, we've actually found that we can link the user databases from OpenSim grids to Jibe worlds so that you actually can just log in with the same account. If you create an account in the Jibe world, it's there in OpenSim and vice versa. So I think there are things on the back end that you can do. The reason I talked more about web-based interconnectivity today is because that was the topic. I talked all about hypergridding yesterday. Hypergridding is about connecting the virtual worlds to each other. And actually with Jibe, you can actually do that kind of thing as well. We're working on some technology that lets you jump between different Jibe worlds. You actually walk through a little portal that looks like a hypergrid portal. The same thing with other virtual worlds. Interconnectivity is key between the worlds themselves. But today I was trying to talk of a broader perspective about interconnectivity. A step beyond that, thinking about interconnectivity between different types of web-based platforms. Learning management systems, databases, and connecting with virtual worlds like that. In general, I think the interconnectivity is the way to go. Someone asked, when you hold office hours, is it in Jibe with voice? I have 4. If you go to my blog and you look at the link that says My Office Hours, I have 4 different office hours each week, and 2 of them are in the Reaction Grid public OpenSim grid, and 2 of them are in Jibe. And in each one, in OpenSim, I tend to stay in text chat. In Jibe, I go between voice and chat depending on what people want to talk about. Let's see. There's somebody else who... someone said, do you think the virtual world community is becoming fragmented from the development of all of the different platforms? How do we stay connected and keep the knowledge of the community building? it depends on how well the pieces talk to each other in terms of the technology, for one. If people sort of disperse to many different platforms that don't really talk to each other and that are not interconnected, not just to other virtual worlds, but with the wider web, then I think you have a danger of isolation and siloing. And walled gardens walled gardens are nice for places. Walled gardens are nice for things to start and grow and get up to speed. But long term, walled gardens tend to not be a good model for long-term growth and a diversity of different types of growth. In terms of how to stay connected, I think the challenge there is to figure out the right tool for the right job. Different people want to be connected in different ways. Like, for example, I'm a really big fan of Google Groups. I love Google Groups because it's a great way to have asynchronous threaded conversations, either through email and on a bulletin board type style web page. So, for example, this Hypergrid Adventurers Club that I was talking about, we do a lot of stuff. We do stuff in OpenSim all the time, but we have a Google group, and we have like 170 people in that Google group, and those conversations are just wonderful. So I think the trick is to find the right tools for the right types of conversations that you want to have to keep things moving forward. Well, let me see here. Are hypergrid worlds on different platforms incompatible? Yes. Well, there are unfortunately right now there are 3 versions of the hypergrid protocol, and they are not compatible with each other. And so the hypergrid is a bit fragmented at the moment, but that's converging. That's just a temporary, that's a growing pain. What happened was the protocols diverged a little bit during certain upgrades, but it's converging. It's growth. It's growing pains. That's really what it is. And the nature of open source development is things move fast, and sometimes things break, but then things are fixed, right? And so it's Open Simulator is a pioneering platform. And if people are very interested in hypergridding and how all of that works, please go to my blog again. Go to becunningendfulloftricks.com and click on the link on there that says Hypergrid Adventurers Club and join the Google group. I really recommend people do that first of all, and then just start talking to people, and then come to some of our meetings, and then take it from there. So now I think I'm over. Uh-oh. The button is red.
The button is red.
Yeah, I'm running out of here. Don't get me out of here. Don't eject me. There we go. Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Pathfinder.
It's my pleasure.